Good evening, folks. It is Monday, March 11th, 7 o'clock, and this is the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. We're going to take attendance after I officially call this meeting to order, which I did, so let's call the roll.
Okay. Councilmember Wu,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Hersey,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Hazen,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
All right, first up we have approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from February 25th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll do that. I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Dennis, seconded by Bill. Is there any corrections or comments on the minutes? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes. There is one addition to the agenda tonight, which is a discussion item. We're going to discuss a possible procedural change regarding how the council receives cases from the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Do we want to put that after our work, or does anybody care if we do that first before we get into anything after? Okay.
After's fine with me.
So we will make that item 9A in between 9 and 10.
Do you need to vote on that?
I don't think we need to vote on it.
I
could just-
detect a consensus.
We could vote on it. Just asking.
I'm not seeing any hesitancy, so I think we're good. All right. Public input. I don't have any cards. Is anybody hiding any from me? Does anybody wish to address the Urbana City Council? Now's the time to do so. All right. Well, then we're going to move on to our presentation of the night, which is on the bike share program, and Lily Wilcock is going to walk us through what's been happening with bike share and what the future of bike share is. Thanks, Lily.
Future of bike share. I don't know. Sounds very.
The future of bike share in Urbana,
There we go.
more specifically.
Like that. So, the purpose of tonight really is to talk about what has been happening with the current bike share operation in the community, and the upcoming discussions. To get feedback for staff for the current discussions that we're having with the three-party IGA, the other two members in our whether to renew or whether to make changes to the intergovernmental agreement. So really fast to go over the 2018-2019. So before we get to how many bikes, it was signed and implemented in September 2018. Almost immediately, the bikes were in use and seen all over town. The bike program initially launched with about 200 or so bikes, and within the week was up to 500 bikes. There so far has been 14,800 users, all unique. That's about 300 subscribers too, so those are people who have kind of all access passes to it, so they kind of use it like their own bicycle, as well as just short-term 50-cent per ride use. There has been 165,000 total rides, which is about 1,000 rides per day on those 500 bicycles. Ridership is highest on campus, but downtown Urbana and downtown Champaign are the second most popular locations outside of right underneath campus. It fills transportation gaps, so that's been a very impressive thing. Almost immediately we saw these bicycles go in places where it's very hard to reach those places without a car. And so that was exciting to see for a lot of people who had been talking about bike share for many, many, many years in this community. The complaints, questions, and comments went from about 1 to 3 a week in September of 2018. And today, and I would say all of 2019, they've been nearly non-existent. So, with that, the current community members, the university, the city of Urbana, and the city of Champaign we're getting to a place where if we want to make changes to the intergovernmental agreement, we can. The current intergovernmental agreement will expire June 30th of 2019. Champaign has recently approved continuing their pilot program. So unlike Urbana, they have a pilot program, and they will continue pilot for the next year. So that has nothing to do with the IGA. Some changes may be considered for the IGA and be added to their pilot program. That was the consensus that they had at their last meeting in study session on this. The IGA is a three-party agreement, as we discussed earlier, and it covers, in particular, it covers our joint licensing agreement. So City of Urbana passed changes to our code, particularly the traffic code. And so for us, the IGA just handles the joint licensing. It makes sure that all parties agree to the program and the general rules of the program. Basically everything besides bicycle parking, because parking is really truly something that is unique to each community. Urbana has adopted those items as part of the code. The IGA can auto-renew, so no changes have to be made. Staff would like to ask you all for your thoughts and for anything you've been considering. We have a couple of options that have been discussed already in Champaign, but it's also probably a good idea for us to discuss this today. And we'd like to hear what you might want to ask of the partner agencies too for any changes. First option to consider would be increase the number of bicycles to operate. I will say, Ben. There has been, and Ben Thomas is the manager for Via Ride for the community, and he is in the audience tonight. So if you have any questions about that Via Ride's operations, you can direct them to him. But there has been, it seems like, a lot of demand for these bicycles, and so one of the options for the IGA to consider is increasing the number of bikes allowed in the community. 500 was really a number that was set based on a 2,000, 2,500 number that we were really thinking we were going to see when we thought that if the bike share program is open to anyone to apply, any company to apply, and for the amount of level of interest we got, number of companies we had contacting the community to apply, that we thought we were going to have at least 3 to 5 companies come into the community. And currently we have one company, and that's 500 bikes, and we're seeing people hide bikes on campus. We're seeing the many shenanigans that happens when people, there's probably a higher demand than what we currently have operating. So that is one option. Another option to consider is increase the fee for operating. If you can refer to the memo, this was discussed a little bit. I will like to point out, so that was something that was discussed at the Champaign study session. Just as a reminder, the City of Urbana currently receives about $200 for the application process per company. I would, just for the context of Urbana and the City of Urbana, we do currently, as far as the planning and staff time, $200 would not actually cover all of the costs that it takes for staff time to implement programs or to handle programs, but it is very on par with what we charge for maybe other zoning or planning cases. It's usually around $175 to $200 per case, and I would say that the bike share program has caused minimal staff time to planning and public works. Both cities have a $1,000 savings account of sorts put up by the company for any issues and for us to take care of them, and as an emergency, a last resort, and then we would charge that. And we have never had to tap into that. So most of the bike share operations have been handled by the company. So, do you have any questions? Bill?
So yeah, I enjoy seeing the bike share, and I'm registered, but I haven't really tried it out yet, except at farmers market and stuff. But it's great to have that option. But I also know that a lot of neighbors have a fairly low tolerance for bicycles parked irregularly or blocking sidewalks, things like that. And I've seen a few, but I think it's been pretty reasonable so far. But I also don't see the highest use areas very much. I work on the edge of campus. I don't go through down the middle of campus that much. It seems like that's so I don't really see how the U of I so far has weighed in on this as far as how they feel about expanding any sort of numbers or anything. They do get $5 per bike though, so they get a lot more than we do.
They do, yeah.
But so how's the process going to work as far as involving them and getting their feedback on?
Preferably, I am the contact for dealing with those, with talking with the university and Champaign, and I'd prefer to have feedback from you all tonight before I really start talking to those guys if they do want to see any changes. The contact for the university is Morgan White.
Okay, so then so once you get feedback from Champaign-Urbana, it'll go through the U of I, and then you guys will put together some kind of agreement that tries to incorporate everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, and to add to that too, after tonight, I will be coming to BPAC in April and also discussing this at BPAC. And then I would like to come back to you all with a set of proposals and actually have something for a little bit more specific, but based off of your comments tonight.
So then, if we did decide to allow a company that had been in business for a year without any problems to add 200 bikes or something, then the assumption is there would be some kind of policy that sets that as a policy, and then another company that comes in they would start out with 500 and get the same opportunity to add 200 a year from.
That is an option, and I think it's a really good option. So, just to paraphrase Bill, and you can confirm if this is what you said, but the idea would be ViaRide has been operating in our community for more than a year and without any problems. And as a matter of fact, they've actually been really helping out with a lot of community bicycle-related events, which has been a really great sign of good faith from the company and helpful for some of the City of Urbana's already kind of sponsored events. So with that, being a really good partner in the bicycle community and also being responsible with their bicycles so far, and I think a fairly difficult kind of business plan and business type to manage. Yeah, you could suggest a performance-based increase. So a company that's already been operating with no problems could maybe operate at 700, 750 bikes, where maybe bikes that have never been seen, a company that's never operated in this community, and we want to try it out, and maybe they'd have come in at that entry level of 500. So that is an option, yeah. So not just to increase the numbers for everybody, but maybe just for people on a performance base.
So if we were leaning that way, then would you guys put together some kind of exact criteria about how that would be judged as far as whether they did a good job after that first year? Okay.
Thanks, Bill. Dennis?
So far, I think I like Bill's comment. It sounds like a progressive and thoughtful way to handle it. One of the things that you included in your memo was that we didn't know really, and we don't know yet officially how many other bicycle companies will want to try to operate in our town, but we've had proposals, right? Or people have asked about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was at the university, we had about 7 to 9 companies that contacted me about operating on campus. Campus is obviously someplace that a lot of these companies have really targeted.
Sure.
You know, being a very car-free kind of environment and younger population. But so far, no one else besides ViaRide has actually gone through the application process.
Mm-hmm.
The City of Champaign did say that they had 2 companies that they thought, you know, to the best of their abilities, will submit an application potentially after this next IGA expires and renews.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that any company that would come into the market today would their license to run in the program would expire June 30th, no matter what. So it would expire. So they would be paying that $200 for only a couple of months of operation. So some companies might apply again after July 1st.
Right.
So.
Okay, that makes some sense on that. So, so you did say that we might just leave things as they are and wait to see what happens at the renewal period before making changes in policy. But actually, I thought that sounded like a good solution. But I think maybe doing the merit-based, increasing after 1 year of probation, or what you might want to call it, or business, maybe sounds more proactive.
Alice.
All right, bear with me. I have a lot of questions.
Oh, that's great.
So, walking through campus every single day, the main quad and so forth, at the very beginning, I think that there were a lot of bikes misparked. Over there by Greg, there would be piles of them. Over at the Armory, there would be ones thrown about. I will say that it's gotten a lot better. Of course, we're in winter right now, so hopefully they don't revert back to the behavior that they had at the very beginning. There were some very amusing shenanigans posted on Reddit where people were putting bikes on top of bus stops and so forth, and I haven't seen that in a while. So I think overall, I think that there has been an improvement of quote-unquote compliance in terms of where people are parking them. But I have a couple of questions in terms of the data that's being gathered right now. So I don't remember, and I don't think we have anything that asks the company to report the complaints or the number of times that bicycles have been requested to be removed in the location. Is that correct?
We do not.
So I would like to see that added. I think that people would be more willing to actually contact the company versus contacting the city to ask them to remove bikes. I think that that would help us decide whether or not how the community is reacting to this. My second question is in terms of electric bikes and scooters. So I know that in the conversation, in your memo, you had mentioned that scooters have not been brought up yet. Electric bikes have been brought up, and so I'm wondering if this current agreement that we have allows for that.
Yeah, electric bikes were they were always allowed. I think maybe the first couple of drafts you all saw last year, if you were here last year, maybe did talk a little bit about electric bikes, but it permitted it. So electric bikes are actually pretty well regulated within the the Department of Transportation in their vehicle code. The finalized version of the IGA that you approved actually did talk about kind of just talked about electric bikes as a bicycle. So, and electric bikes are bicycles. As long as they don't go over 20 miles an hour, in general, they are a bicycle. There's a lot of little stipulations that kind of go into that, and there's different types. But to paraphrase, they are bicycles. So I think Via Ride this month is going to be switching out 100 of the 500 bikes. That's what they've reported to us, to electric bikes. And I will tell you, as a staff person, I'm fairly excited about that because that opens up a lot of opportunity for people who are maybe not a little discouraged about bike riding, just with getting back into shape, getting on the bicycle. And I've heard a lot of personally a lot of great stories about electric bikes helping people who maybe haven't ridden a bicycle in a while get back into it. So I'm excited to see that shift and, again, encourage another healthy and environmentally friendly way of transportation.
And scooters? Does this cover scooters?
It does not cover scooters.
Okay.
And I would recommend not talking about scooters. I don't think there's much of a stomach right now at the university in Champaign without doing a lot more research. So I can come back to you all and present a lot of information about scooters, but without doing further research, it's a sticky situation, sticky subject.
I will say my aunt and
Yeah.
uncle have electric bikes in San Francisco, and it's
Yeah.
really helped them in their 70s be able to go up those hills in the last leg. So that's helpful for
Yeah.
older populations or people who perhaps aren't as strong to ride on our prairie flatlands here. Okay, so my other questions, let's see here. Oh, yes. My other question was in terms of regulations on where bikes could be parked. Now, I rode a bike at the very beginning and used the app to unlock it and pay for it and so forth. I didn't notice anywhere in the app that told me where I was supposed to leave the bike. I don't know if that's been updated since then.
Yep. So that has been updated. That was updated a couple months ago, and then they just rolled out. I've noticed as a app user, they just rolled out another version of the app, and it made everybody go through that again. And they added to their maps, suggested areas of parking too as well. I will say that there is something to be discussed about right-of-way space, because parking sidewalks was a concern in Champaign as well, blocking sidewalks, and I think that adding bicycles probably you could see that. We might want to consider something about looking at right-of-way space, and staff has talked. I have talked to Public Works about that, and so we're right now discussing what maybe some options of right-of-way space for parking bicycles could look like in Urbana.
Okay. And then I had one final kind of comment in terms of some of the proposals in terms of increasing. I do like the idea of kind of allowing people who have good behavior, have a good business model, to increase slightly the amount that they're able to have on the roads. I am concerned about a deluge. I don't think it'll happen, but I know in some of the European countries it has happened, where a whole bunch of people just dump a whole bunch of bikes. So I would be hesitant to raise it too high, and I think that we should think about in next year's, if we get more and more operators in our community, to cap the total amount that we have on the streets, whether it's 2,000, 3,000, whatever it is. But I think that is a conversation that we don't really have to have right now, because we don't have a number of operators, but something to just kind of keep in mind as we go through this process. And then last but not least, nope, that's it for now. Thank you.
That's a very good comment. I would like for everybody to also consider, though, as we have the opportunity to regulate dockless bike share bikes, just keep in consideration that we don't have a cap for the amount of cars that are on our streets. We don't have a cap for a lot of other modes of transportation. And this is actually something that's kind of reducing congestion and the impact to street maintenance. So I want to kind of keep that consideration out there while
Yeah,
we're thinking about
absolutely.
capping bikes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Eric?
Yeah, it seems to me, number one, it's working well, that the city is a lot better off for having it than not. Probably could be tweaked somewhat, and it does seem also to me that it's appropriate to raise the allowed number by some amount, some modest amount, until, it looks as though we're saturating, but something modest this coming year, maybe, I don't know, 50%, maybe up to 750. And I don't feel an urgent need to open it up to more companies at this time. If this company is really being a good partner, they've brought the whole service to us, to our residents. I guess the other side of that is maybe one would like to have some competition, but right now, or for this next cycle, this next year, I would say, why don't we just keep it? My feeling from the report and the discussion is maybe it would be appropriate just to keep it with the one company we have.
Thanks, Eric. Anybody? Dennis?
I want to just ask or make a comment, two comments maybe. One, for electrical bicycle, if we have those introduced in the community, so I don't have one, I haven't used one, how are they recharged and who's responsible for making sure that they run?
Certainly, yeah. I can answer that in generally, but as far as if you want to ask a technical question to VeoRide, I can ask Ben Thomas to come up and discuss VeoRide's electric bikes.
I could rely on your
Sure,
overview,
yeah, so,
Lily. I don't know if it requires a battery change or a plug-in.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Well, that is specific to all bike manufacturers. They're different. For most bikes, you pull them out and you plug them in at night. Most privately owned ones. So a lot of people in this community do have electric bikes already, just privately owned. And so for most of those bikes, those styles of bikes, you just pull out the battery and then you charge it. That would be kind of difficult for, I think, a bike share operation. VeoRide's electric bike is going to be a little bit different. You can pull the battery out instead of plugging the bicycle into a wall or anything like that. They can remove it out in the field, and then they can put a new battery back in. So they just need to go up to the bike and do that, which is kind of handy because I think a lot of their staff is on bicycles, especially on campus. So they're able to just carry a set amount of batteries with them, and then replace the nearing dead battery with a fresh charged battery. As far as monitoring that, I know that this company, VioRide, has talked to us. I asked that, and they did say that they have they're all they have an auto-populated spreadsheet of sorts, like a dashboard, that will tell them when a bicycle is getting down to 20% or lower in battery level, and that's how they know to send staff out to change the battery.
Yeah, because if you own one, you're going to take care of it really well, but if you don't, you're going to leave it on the street, and good luck next person, it seems to me.
Certainly, luckily the bikes can report to the company at what battery level they are at.
And then I guess that leads into my other comment about taking care of not leaving them in the right-of-way in a manner that inhibits other people from enjoying the right-of-way. That you mentioned that people own a lot of cars, and we're not capping those, but the bikes are not owned by anybody, so they're rented, and so the proprietorship or of ownership or whatever, pride of ownership, doesn't seem to maybe reach down to dropping your bicycle wherever it's convenient in the front lawn of somebody or the biology building or whatever on campus.
That's
So-
true. I think what's interesting is that we do have that $1,000 to work with as far as, because they are owned by the company, and if we need to go out and have an emergency situation where we need to move bicycles, the city does have that to tap. What's also, I think, is interesting is that right-of-way space is limited, and taking away more and more of right-of-way space might be difficult in some parts of downtown Urbana for people with wheelchairs and making sure that it's accessible. What's interesting, and I think it's discussed a little bit, is providing some of that off-street space, since bicycles are primarily ridden on the street. Off-sidewalk, sorry.
Thanks,
Parking space.
Dennis.
Yeah.
Charisse?
I was just going to say, I've noticed a few of those bicycles in my neighborhood, so, and they just seem to be thrown about any old kind of way. So does someone come and collect the bike, or does the next, a person sees the bicycle and they go, oh, I can ride this to campus rather than take the bus, or?
A little bit of both. So we've talked to the company about that as well. And like I said, we can always direct any of these questions about operations to Ben Thomas.
Okay. So
About
Ben-
operation specific.
Mhm.
I will tell you from what I've asked and gotten reported from the company, the bike share company in general, after a couple of weeks, if it hasn't been moved, they will come out. Again, that's all kind of controlled on a computer. Like, this bicycle will report to the company that it hasn't been moved in a little while. I would sometimes discourage a little bit from assuming that it hasn't been used in a while.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to tell with these bikes. I've had people say that this bike has been here for 2 weeks, and when I talked to the company about it, the bicycle had been moved every day, but it was just at a weird time. And
it's
so
just
someone
always
was
taken
riding
back to
it.
the same place, or
Yeah,
something
and
like
parking
that?
it at the same place. So that's been kind of a interesting thing in the neighborhoods, that we
Okay.
have regular bike riders.
Yeah.
I've seen that kind of around Urbana High School too as well.
Yeah, because they just seem to just toss them in the grass next to a wall, or
Keeping
Or-
it off the sidewalk.
yeah, they're keeping
Yeah.
it off the sidewalk. But
It's difficult.
yes, so my question is that even if there's some place for a rider to park a bicycle, is it an issue with these bikes being parked on private property? I mean, like at an apartment complex or something like that? Because I just haven't been able to understand why I would see a bicycle leaning up against the fence on Bradley Avenue. haven't been able to, just like, don't they have some place to take this bike? I mean, it just sits there.
so
That's why I was asking.
right, I don't know if it has been an issue or not. I can't tell you. I haven't received any complaints,
Okay.
and since October, since I started here.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Charisse. Anybody else? One more go around, Bill?
Yeah. So on Eric's comment about one company, our current agreement already allows more than anybody additional companies, right? So we aren't restricting. It just happens that we only have one company right now. And I guess we haven't really talked about much about fee increases. I mean, it seems like anything we did would have to be pretty moderate without driving, so we wouldn't drive people away. I think we talked about having a higher fee at the beginning, and you guys had done some research and said that it was likely to drive companies away. But it seems like we also shouldn't be subsidizing that too much. I mean, it's definitely a community benefit, but I'd be open to a small fee increase, I guess. The only other comment I had was on your Urbana cars per household graph. That is just per household. So a lot of people that live in group quarters, like dormitories or residence halls, they aren't considered households. So that basically excludes the 5,000 to 7,000 students in Urbana that live in residence halls. So there are a lot more people besides the 19% of households that don't have vehicles available.
Yeah, that's a very
Although,
interesting point.
a lot of people in residence halls do have vehicles, but probably not 19%. I don't know.
I feel like there's less and less and less each year. Yeah.
That was interesting too. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else? Yes, Sharice.
Have you noticed or gotten any data on whether or not the bicycles are used more during the school year than the summer, so that, what the number of students, possible students that are actually using the bikes and community, does the number go up during the school year, or?
So that's really interesting. The the bike program has not been in operation for a whole year, so there's no summer information about that.
Okay.
I will say that at the first week that it was really in operation was, I think, the week after school had started at the University of Illinois. But I will say that ridership was a lot lower in January, and that's traditionally when less students are in town because it's in between semesters and there's a break. It wasn't completely down, and it was January, so there were still people riding them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is heartening. I want to draw back to that, something that Ben has told staff a lot, but this 1,000 per day, these are pretty popular bikes in the community. So that's including January. It's averaged out. It's not that high in January, but it's a lot. It's even higher in the summer when it was warm and
Yes, that's what I was wondering too. If the
Yeah.
if the warm months opposed to the colder months,
Certainly.
But you don't have anything to compare it to yet. With
I don't.
because of.
I will. I guess as one quick parting thing, I don't talk to students nearly as much while working at Urbana, but today I had a student visit me at the city building. And they rode a Via ride here, so they're pretty popular.
Okay. Okay.
It was kind of windy. It was nice.
Eric?
So the 1,000 rides a day, is that 1,000 different people, or when does a ride end?
So I can't answer that, and I would, if you're okay with it, I would ask
Sure.
Ben Thomas. Ben, do you want to come up and if you can answer that? Here you go. Introduce yourself.
I'm Ben Thomas. I'm the general manager for Via Ride here at UAUC. To answer your question, so that's 1,000 individual rides, so it's not 1,000 unique riders. So that could be multiple users using bikes, 3 or 4 times a day.
So how does the rider signifies an end by just turning off the app?
Yeah, so you use the app to scan the bike. So the bike has 2 QR
Right.
codes, one on the top, one on the back lock. And so once they scan it, it opens the back lock on the back tire.
Right.
And then when that user is done and they arrive at their destination, they manually have to lock that the lock back.
Okay.
And once they lock it, they'll get a notification on their app, which will give them how much they were charged, emissions they reduced, calories burned, the miles, the trip they rode. Very just kind of a general overview of that ride.
So sometimes a person might go someplace on the bike, complete the ride, then might take the same bike back, or might take a different one.
Correct.
Just depends. Oh, okay.
You'll usually see some outside the Urbana Schnucks. I would assume that's how they're being used.
Mary Alice?
One more question. Do you have the average time that people will ride the bike?
Yes, right now it's currently at 5 minutes.
5 minutes is the average?
Right, is the average, correct?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Lily, have you gotten what you felt like you wanted to get from us as far as direction for moving forward to the next round of IGA?
I believe so. That's up to you all, but anything else?
I think there was pretty general consensus among everyone about the tiered increase, hesitancy towards increasing costs. And I think you made a very valid point that this is the most eco-friendly ride-sharing program we have in town, and the less eco-friendly versions we do not have fees for at all. So
That's true.
that was a good point. I appreciated that you put that in there. All right, well, let's move on then. Thanks, Lily. All right, next up, I've got a list for staff report, but nothing listed. I see Elizabeth getting up. Does that mean you're coming to tell us about something? No. Diane?
Quick announcement. I wanted to recognize the city of Urbana, and particularly our planners who are very much involved in the bicycling promotion, as well as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. We just received the DePaul University Chaddick Institute for Metropolitan Development Recognition of Excellence Promoting Bicycling as an Alternative to Auto Travel. It was presented to the city of Urbana in 2019, and our staff, Kevin Garcia and Craig Schonkweiler, were up at, in Chicago to receive it last week. So congratulations and thank you to all.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, before we jump into our resolutions and further discussion, I did get one public input card from Eldris Melinda Carr, who did not choose to address us, but wanted her position to be entered into the record, that she has continued concern about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues, equity, and historic impact. All right, next up we have resolution number 2019-03-004R, resolution approving the re-engagement of Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus, I'm not sure if that's a chow or a cow, LLP for financial auditing services. Elizabeth.
So important for you to know that when the city engages an auditor, that audit firm actually works for the city council. So this is part of your oversight of our finances. Baker Tilly was initially, which is the easy version of that, by the way, was actually engaged by your previous finance director before I started, and now we have completed 5 audits with them, which was what the original agreement provided for. There have been some unusual things that have happened recently with the transition to the Munis financial system, which presented some specific challenges with the most recent audit that took a great deal more staff time than usual, and also took a great deal more time for the auditors. So in order to provide for a smooth transition when we change auditors, I requested from Baker Tilly a proposal to extend their engagement by 1 year. And they actually gave me 2 proposals. They gave me a proposal to extend it for 1 year and a proposal to extend it for 3 years. After reviewing the pricing for the 3-year option was more favorable, I think, than the 1-year option. We did have a partner rotation during this 5-year period. So after the initial 2 to 3 years, they rotated us to a different partner. That's important because the partner is the person who has the final say on our audit, that has complete responsibility for the oversight that the audit firm has. And so normally you wouldn't want to stay with the same person having oversight for an extended period. In this case, we could extend for an additional 3 years, and we would still only be with the partner who's currently working on our audit, Joe Lightcap, for a 5-year period, even if we extended for 3 years. So there's more detail on the memo. I don't know that it's worth me repeating what you probably have already read, but I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right, questions for Elizabeth. Dennis?
And then, I'm wondering then, would we then have to find a new auditing firm after the period goes, because maybe the 5-year period is as much as you can carry one particular firm, and you do have to like change out for the same kind of security thoughts that you just expressed by partners rotating?
So there's not really a hard and fast rule about staying with the same audit firm. I think certainly if we extend for 3 years, at the end of the 3 years, then we would want to solicit competitive proposals, or the same if you chose to extend for only 1 year. But because of the partner rotation, I don't think we have an issue with too much familiarity between the staff and the auditors or any of those kinds of concerns.
So that's not a requirement by the state or anything like that,
No,
that
this-
you'd change auditing firms?
No, it's not.
Oh, thank you.
Other questions for Elizabeth? Elizabeth, I did want to bring up one thing that you, in your recommendation, because Baker Tilly was working with us during the transfer to Munis, that you feel like it's at least worth us definitely doing 1 more year for continuity. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, there were a lot of things that changed last year. We transitioned financial systems in the middle of the year. We not only transitioned financial systems, but we implemented an entirely new chart of accounts. And that made the audit very challenging, because we were having to research everything that they wanted us to follow up on. We were researching in 2 different systems. We had to pull data from both systems and combine it together and be able to provide the data that they need to produce the financial reports. It was just an unusual and very, very difficult and challenging year, I think, on both sides. Not because there was anything wrong. It was just a challenging year. And so for continuity, when we go to a new auditor, I think it would be better to have 1 year that's a little more routine, and so we have, a really clean, tidy package when we go with a different firm. The first year with a new auditor is very labor-intensive on both sides, because they're coming in, they don't know anything about our practices, our policies, our procedures, our systems, and we also don't know what their expectations are. They may be asking for different work papers and different kinds of information from us. So I think just to have at least one kind of more routine year before we make that transition would be a good idea.
Thank you. Bill?
Do you know how this cost compares to other similar sized cities with similar complexity?
I don't know off the top of my head, and I wasn't here when we did this selection originally. It was shortly before I started here at the city. I'm sure that comparison was done at the time. I would say that cost is probably not the most important factor when choosing an auditor. Baker Tilly has extensive experience with auditing local governments in the state of Illinois. So certainly, I would guess, I'm not going to say certainly, that we could find an auditor who would do this work for less, but whether they would be as well qualified, I can't say that would be the case.
Okay, thanks.
Mary Alice?
So along those lines, your memo states that the 3-year proposal offers very attractive pricing, maintaining current pricing for 1 year, and then increasing it. So is that typical, do you know, from auditors in terms of, certainly increasing it this year, right, fiscal 2019, is due to, in part, because of the change and the additional time, and then going back down to 72, 73, and 74. Is that a traditional increase?
So it's common for those fees to increase by a few percentage points every year. One of the things that auditors look at is that they invest substantially more time in the first year of an audit, and so they'll try and spread that, over the term that for which they're engaged. So in this case, the pricing is probably, I would consider favorable, partly because they don't have that issue of getting through that first year, which requires much more staff time.
All right, so if I also understand, the resolution is written for the 3-year thing, or is both in the language of the resolution?
So it's written for 3 years because that's what I'm recommending.
Okay.
However, if you would choose to go with the 1-year term, we have those documents as well, and we would swap it out and put it in the packet for the meeting next week.
Okay. Dennis?
I think we've had some discussion, and I think just to put it to further discussion, I'm going to make a motion of adopting Resolution 2019-03-004R, a resolution approving the re-engagement of Baker Tilly, Krochow, and Kraus LLP for the financial auditing service for a 3-year period. I'd really like to have a deal, a financial benefit from a 3-year audit, and it sounds like this is potentially such a deal. So I move that we adopt it and take the benefit.
A motion for approval by Dennis. Do I hear a second?
I'll
Oh, yeah.
second the
Yes.
motion
Sorry.
to send
Nah.
this to council.
All right.
Thanks for that
It's a motion
correction.
to send to council, not a motion. Seconded by Eric. Eric got the second. All right. Any further discussion amongst the committee? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. All right, the ayes have it. All right, let's move on. Next ordinance number 2019-03-020, an ordinance approving and causing publication of the official zoning map of the city of Urbana from Plan Case 2372-M-19. Lily again.
Thank you so much for letting us come to you tonight with this. I don't think... There we go. So it's quite a quick turnaround, and it's to be voted upon to either approve or deny next week at council. And I'm really saying this for myself as I try to understand, but we would like to have you consider an ordinance of approval for the republication of the zoning map. So this is just representing everything that's already been approved. It's mostly made up out of rezonings primarily. There's annexations that are now added to the map. That's really the only major difference between last year's map and this year's published map. And that will hopefully help staff. That was a request for people who use the map on a daily basis and maybe don't have access to GIS, a GIS license, or the knowledge to use it. And so they can look at that too as well. So this is just to approve or deny a republication of the map by state law, and it has to be done by March 31st per state law.
Thanks, Lily. Any questions? Mary Alice.
Now, I'd just like to make a motion to move forward to council with a recommendation for approval. Ordinance number 2019-03020, an ordinance approving and causing publication of the official zoning map of the city of Urbana, Illinois, plain case 2372M19.
The motion is by Mary Alice. Do I have a second?
I will second that one. Or I won't.
I'm going to give it to Dennis, or to Dean for enthusiasm.
Lost it twice.
And is there any further discussion amongst the committee? Eric?
I'm looking at my copy of the map and trying to see if it reflects the rezoning that we just discussed last week. And
Yeah.
Does it?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
It's kind of hard because the map attached is a huge size, so you kind of have to scroll,
Okay.
you know, a little over. But
All right. Sharice?
A question that I have, I had several questions. Well, I didn't have several. I had a few. Because I just happened to have my happy zoning ordinance of City of Urbana book here with me. But my question is, are you going to add also or redefine anything in the zoning ordinances
No, this is just, so the.
This is just for the
zoning-
map.
It's the map, yeah, absolutely. A graphical representation of the zoning districts in Urbana.
Okie dokie.
Thanks, Sharice. Bill?
On the vacated right-of-way, the first one listed is the alley vacated, says date approved April 30th, 1977,
Yes.
and we're just now getting
Yeah,
into
no,
the
this
official
is,
map.
that was the first comment I gave to Public Works when they told me that that was approved in the last year. So I did actually include the email that I got from Dan Rothermel, who is the surveyor for Public Works, and he said, yes, the ordinance was recorded in 2018. It was included in the 2007 vacations, so he sent over exhibits, and this was included in the 2007 exhibits, but it was never actually a part of the 2007 vacations. And yes, it was originally approved in 1977 by Hiram Paley was the mayor who signed it.
Okay, and that's part of the hospital complex? there?
Yes,
Okay.
it's right there in the middle of the hospital complex. Yeah,
All right, thanks.
thank you.
Any other
Very-
questions or comments amongst council? All right. All those in favor of pushing this forward, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that will go forward to the full council. All right, last of our ordinances before our discussion item is ordinance number 2019-03-021, an ordinance amending the Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class A liquor licenses for Neiman Foods, DBA Save-A-Lot on North Broadway, and Diane's going to tell us about this unusual case.
Yes, this is unique. It's the first one of this kind that's come before us. Save-A-Lot on Broadway is requesting a Class A liquor license. It's known as a pour license. They want to eventually apply to the state of Illinois for a video gaming license to allow to apply for video gaming terminals in the store. The store currently holds a Class C license, which is for packaged liquor. If they receive the video gaming license from the state, they then have to come back to the city council for approval for the video gaming G1 license from the city of Urbana. So at this point, you have the option of recommending approval or not for the Class A license, and then therefore later you would have the option of approving or not approving a gaming license. Representatives from Save-A-Lot are here. We have an assistant manager and a representative from Neiman Foods. What I wanted to also note is that you often ask, what does the city of Champaign do? They recently revised their entire liquor code. They have a grocery rider that permits the sale of wine and beer for drink, for consumption on the premises of a grocery store or specialty food store, but they do not allow video gaming in those establishments. So why don't you come on up? I think that we'll have the discussion tonight due to a last-minute legal question that has just come up. I'm thinking this is going to be remaining in committee tonight, but
Okay.
we can have the discussion.
What was the legal question?
We'll
Oh, gotcha.
discuss it later.
Okay. Committee questions for our assistant manager, or did you have a presentation you were going to make to us? Tell us about it.
I don't have a presentation. I was more for questions.
Okay. Bill and then Sharice.
So is this for the grocery part of the store or the liquor?
No, so the liquor store is 21 and up, and so it would be on that part of the store. And the reason this came up was because we originally had a pouring license, an on-site consumption license, and when we went to apply for the games, we realized that it had been switched about a year ago. We didn't catch it, and because it is in the 21 and up area only, that's why we're applying for it again.
So
So
then, I don't know if our current ordinances require Bassett training for packaged liquor sales. Do you know what Bassett training is?
Yep, and they do not, I don't believe they do. So this
that
would require
that would
Bassett for
require
all,
Bassett.
yep.
And
And
I think
currently,
there's two different kinds of Bassett, one's for package and one's for open liquor, so you'd have to take both of them, basically.
yes, so we have gas stations and grocery stores throughout the state that have on-site pouring licenses, and the Harvest Market in Champaign, so our employees have to be Bassett trained at the restaurant there as well.
Yeah, the Harvest Market has like local brews poured on tap. Are you guys gonna do that too?
If you want us to do that, we would absolutely have, if that's what you would want us to do, we can absolutely make that happen.
Okay, thanks.
Sharice,
Yeah, I guess my question is, what is the purpose of putting video gaming in the grocery store?
Right, so we're always looking for other revenue streams. You know, the
Okay.
margins on groceries is minuscule, so
Okay.
we're always looking for things to help. You know, we just closed a county market in Shelbyville, so we're just always looking for another revenue stream. And we have a good customer base. We have a very large store, especially in the liquor store, so we're just looking things to add other revenue streams.
So is the video gaming area going to be set apart from the rest of the grocery store? Will there be a separate entrance? Or-
So at the Save-A-Lot, it's divided by an entire wall, so there's two separate entrances. One's to the grocery store,
Right.
and it doesn't even have access to the liquor store. It has
Okay.
a separate entrance. There's an employee-only door. And then within that 21 building, the liquor area is 21 and up. We are going to build a room for the machines themselves, so they'll be isolated once again.
Okay. My other question is, so in order for you to get the gaming license, you have to have the pour license?
Yep, that's the qualifier. So anybody that has machines has a pouring liquor license, unless they're a truck stop.
Okay.
Okay.
thanks, Sharice. Jim?
Question.
I was the one that originally raised the quote legal question, and I think you've clarified it, but I want to make sure I understand. Just so you understand, currently, the way our Class A liquor license provides is if you are awarded a Class A liquor license, you cannot allow anyone under 18 on the premises, I mean, including in the grocery store.
Gotcha, okay.
But you indicated that the liquor component, the liquor store, let's call it that, or the liquor area, is a completely walled-off separate area with its own entrance.
Yes, sir.
All right, does it have its own address, just out of curiosity?
I'm not aware of that. It does? Yeah, it does.
Okay, you're good.
We have 220 North Broadway, and then it's 224 North Broadway.
Oh, and one of them's the liquor one, and the other's the grocery store. You're okay.
Perfect.
Make sure you put that one on the application.
Yes, yeah.
All right, Dean, question.
I apologize if the answer's obvious, but what hours would they be able to do the gaming?
While we were open, so we'd follow the rules of the Class A liquor license unless you wanted us to be something different, which we'd be fine with abiding by. So, but it would just follow the Class A licenses. The store's not open till it's after 10, right? So it's closed at 10 anyway, so we would not be extending those hours.
So what are the hours of the grocery store?
Is it-
8 to 9.
8 a.m. to 9 p.m.?
You want to come up? You can come up to the microphone, too.
And then what are the hours of the liquor store?
Same.
8 to 9?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying the hours of the gaming would just follow?
At this time, it would just follow. We have not extended anywhere else yet, so it's just while we're open, we've done that. We've continued to keep the hours the same.
So, okay. I don't know what the hours on the license law is, but,
It'd be till 1 and 2.
No, I was going to say it's till 2, I think.
Same as the bars.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Eric?
Before I ask a question, I just want to express my astonishment at this legal situation where you're not allowed to gamble sober. You have to drink to gamble. That's just amazing. I assume that's an unintended consequence of how the law is set up.
No, it's an intentional state law.
Yeah, it's
They had
a
to
state law,
qualify
it's
it.
not our law.
Yes,
And
yeah.
it was probably included to appease the racetrack industry and the riverboat gambling industry.
Trust me, we don't want to have dram shop insurance. We would prefer not to sell it by the drink, but it's the qualifier.
So I'm just trying to understand the scenario. Will there be now a seating area? There'll be chairs and tables where people can sit and drink?
Yeah, so we do that with a state law. We will have a table with a couple chairs outside the room in the area, but we're not going to advertise. You know, we're very upfront about that. That is not why we're here. You know, that's not why we want to
Okay.
do it.
So you're not really looking to do a lot of poor business?
Correct,
Okay.
exactly.
You just want to acquire the legal ability to do it so that you can get the machine?
Exactly.
Okay.
Mary Alice?
So I just want to reiterate what the mayor had said, which is this is only a step one in terms of a gambling license in the entity, and it would still come back to council for.
Yes,
Okay.
they need to have this particular license in order to apply to the state of Illinois. Then the state has to approve their application for the video gaming terminals, which then will come back to the city of Urbana and the
Okay.
council.
And I believe, if I remember correctly, there is a cap on the number of gambling licenses. Is that right?
No, we have no cap in the city of Urbana. The way that we set up the gaming terminals is that each one is individually considered by city council. And if it's approved, then the number of allowable terminals increases by one. If not, it stays the same. But each that was kind of the middle road that we took when we set this whole thing up, was to give council and the community a chance to weigh in on each application, because you can take context, neighborhood, that sort of thing into account.
And do we have other liquor stores in the community that have these gambling?
I think
You got a few gambling places.
this is
not
the
in
first
grocery
grocery
stores.
store.
Liquor grocery
This
store.
is the first liquor/grocery store, which is why it's,
We'd love to be a test
Okay.
case.
All right.
this
Okay.
is why it's taken a little longer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Bill, and then Therese.
And I was curious, is this something your customers have talked about? Are they already gambling someplace and they just said, why don't you guys have
Yeah.
machines here or something like that?
We actually do.
Okay.
We actually have a few customers that actually go down the street to gamble, which if I can get them back on our side, then they shop with us, they're with us, they shop at the grocery store, they're there, that's all in one. You don't have to go nowhere else. Gamble, get your groceries,
And then,
got your eggs, we got
Just
'em.
a couple other things for the council members that weren't on when we passed the G1 and G2 licenses. The G1, which they would be applying for, I think, is the one that, it's not the gambling hall license, right? The G2 is the gambling hall license, and there are extra things you have to do for the G2, where more than 50% of your revenue comes from gambling. Then there's extra zoning things about distances from other locations, and there's notification where we send out notices to people that live within 250 or 500 feet or something like that to, in a public hearing, and so it's a lot more steps to go through to get the G2 license. The G1 is more meant that we were thinking it would be more like for restaurants and bars, and I don't know if we thought about liquor stores, but.
Therese, did you have one more question?
Yeah, what I kind of would like to know how many other video gaming places are located within about a 2-mile radius of your establishment. I do shop at Save-A-Lot.
Well, we thank you.
Okay. But I also know that close by there's like a Lacey's or something and a Ruby's and
The gaming parlors.
yeah, and I would just be interested in knowing how many video gaming places are, within walking distance, or, just a 2-mile radius is what I would like to ask, because it's very close to my ward.
Last time we considered one of these, we had a map made, so I can get that sent to you,
Okay.
and a list of all the establishments.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis.
Yeah, so I have some concerns about initiating gambling in a grocery store. I don't know, you're not changing the name of the liquor department, it's still Save-A-Lot, which is mostly considered to be a grocery store. So if you were to get the license for the liquor pouring, but were turned down for the gambling, would that affect how your decisions would go?
Weird.
Yes, it would change your decision.
Yeah. We're not doing it so we can turn it into a bar. We just want to be very upfront about that. So, that's the goal, is to get the video gaming, just because it's minimal cost of goods for us, and we have a good foot traffic. We do state lottery currently, and so we know that there is a want for it. There's people would use it. We do believe that.
All right, anybody else have questions for them, or can I get a motion to move this forward for our discussion?
I'll move to send this to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Okay, motion from Eric. Do I hear a second?
Question?
Sure.
The mayor was suggesting that this might be retained in committee.
That was
for-
before we cleared up this question about the standalone entrance. Thank you.
Looking for a second on Eric's motion. No seconds? All right. Well, I guess if we can't get a second on it, then we can't push this forward. So thanks for you guys' applying. If you want to discuss what happens after this, come up and ask us
I'd
afterwards.
make a motion to move this, to send this to council with no recommendation.
Well, okay. So I've got
I'll
a
second.
motion from Bill Brown with a no recommendation to go to council.
I'll second that.
All right. Seconded by Eric. Discussion amongst council, amongst the committee. No? Okay. Bill?
I guess if you know you're going to vote no, go ahead and vote no, but it might be worth thinking about for a week, and so now we have that option if you want to do that.
Okay. Voice vote to push this forward with no recommendation to the full council. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll take opposed.
I will as well.
All right, that's 4 ayes, 5 from me because I would have said aye, and 2 nays from Mary Alice and Dennis. All right, so that passes. It's going to go forward with no recommendation, and we'll consider it again next week at full council.
Thank you for your time. We
Thanks,
appreciate it.
gentlemen. All right. Well, that is it for our ordinances, and now we move on to our last item of the evening, a discussion item brought forward by Dennis Roberts. This is to discuss a procedural change regarding how council receives cases from the Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. His goal is to direct cases reviewed by the Planning Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals and how they're forwarded to council, mostly to be introduced at the next scheduled committee of the whole meeting. Dennis, if you want to lead us with a little bit more about why you brought this up and what we hope to accomplish. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. We do discuss fairly often development cases. We also are asked to approve changes in zoning, which sometimes are not as rubber stamp or clear cut as others. And various cases in the recent past have brought forth a lot of community concern. And we have been in the position a couple times of approving a final design or a final development project with really only 3 to 4 days awareness of them, if we are dependent upon what's posted on as a URL connecting on the internet to the packet and picking up our packets here at the city building. These approvals are based on 3 days over a weekend for consideration of the merits of the case, and then we have basically a Monday during the day while staff is present to ask questions or raise comments, and then sometimes we're not really sure what the answers will be until the meeting itself. So I feel that on these significant decisions, we should, as a practice, not be placed in the position where we have to make a final decision just with like 2 or 3 days to consider it. And one of the other things that's been apparent is that it also is very frustrating for the public to come before the city council to express their concerns and views, and then we don't really have any time to consider those or further talk with our constituents or the public in general about those, or to explore the merit of those, because we're basically deciding within a few minutes what the final outcome will be. So I don't think it's a service to the public to make these decisions so rapidly. And the logical way of allowing at least a week for consideration, interaction perhaps with the developers or with staff to have questions analyzed or new information brought forward would be to really request and require that these conversations come to us not as the City Council for the final vote, but to the Committee of the Whole, which is basically more of a study session as compared to the Council, so that we could develop and learn more about options that we have before our vote. It puts a lot of pressure on the City Council, and the public itself, I feel, isn't served properly by short notice. So even though it maybe seems efficient or effectacious to proceed very quickly from commission or zoning board or whatever to, or even from presentations just that come directly from staff, perhaps by right, I feel that the place to start is the Committee of the Whole. And then we can forward things to the City Council with a greater understanding of the merit of the case. Now, yes, as a City Council, we could decide not to act that night and either delay it a week, defer it to the next meeting of the City Council, or to send it to the Committee of the Whole from Council. Now, we've had developers come here who said that they must have the answer tonight, either because their schedule is being thrown off and they have to start immediately, or they're saying that if they don't get the answer tonight, their threatened staff that they might walk. They might not indeed even pursue the development as it had been negotiated through staff. So I don't like to be kidnapped by the needs of a developer. I think that the city and the public have the right to explore the issue at least for a week. And we were actually asking one of our developers, potential developers, if they would please give us a week to consider these questions, and the developer told us no. That they would not, they didn't have the time to allow us to take that week for consideration. So I think this is a disservice to the community. So that's why I've brought this discussion forward. And to me, it seems like if we were to be feel uncomfortable about making a decision in one night and we were to delay it, you would get the very same effect as having it first come to the City Council on a week, or a Committee of the Whole, and then a week later come to Council, because there would still be the week delay in some direction or another. And actually, if it was sent back to the city, to the Committee of the Whole, and the Committee of the Whole met a week later, they would still have to forward to the City Council, and that would be a 2-week delay. It would make no sense to do it that way. So let's be the most effective as possible, and yet provide the community with as much time to input and interact with us, and for us to make our own deliberation as possible. So I don't know if there is any state requirement that requires a case that comes from our planning commission that it must go to the City Council, but if there's not, it just must be then that our own ordinances or our own policies direct that. And we do have the ability to modify and change those policies, and I would recommend it. And even though this is just a discussion tonight, and I haven't written out any proposal, because then when we need to have that posted on the agenda ahead of time, and I haven't done that. But I'd like to get feedback from my fellow council members, and also probably from staff.
All right, well, I think first I'd like to ask for comments from staff and or the mayor about how our procedure is done currently, just in response to that before we get into discussion amongst ourselves.
So how it's done currently and how I've seen it done in other communities in which I've worked is that the recommending body, Plan Commission and ZBA in this case, they hold the public hearing. So that is what is advertised. That is where the public are expected to come and speak or present a letter if they don't wish to speak, voicing any concerns or support for a project. That is really where the input is supposed to come at a project, is at that Plan Commission or that ZBA meeting. because it's the public hearing is at those meetings. So then the idea that everything has sort of been fleshed out at that level and the public has spoken at that time, then it goes straight to the approval body who takes into account the recommendation and what was heard at the public hearing. So that's how we do it here is consistent with how it's done elsewhere and is consistent with how public hearings are held in the state of Illinois as far as I'm concerned.
Diane?
Just have a couple of observations. This may seem like a small change in policy, but it's actually a significant change that you're asking people to consider. Couple observations. One is many of the cases that come through the zoning board or the plan commission are very straightforward. They're not controversial. They're small scale. And to add an extra, to require an extra step for every single case coming out of the zoning ZBA or the plan commission places a burden. And a lot of these cases are involving homeowners or small businesses or local businesses or, somebody's remodeling a house or something. So it's not like, and most of them are not big developments like we've seen in the last couple of last 6 months. So to automatically add and require another step for every single case coming out of ZBA and Plan Commission, I think places a real burden and hardship on folks, especially if they're coming to every meeting or if they have to travel from out of town to attend a meeting. You're adding another step. Secondly, you do have options, as Lori said, in the Plan Commission and the zoning. Those cases are often continued within the Plan Commission, within the ZBA, especially Plan Commission. If it's a more complicated case, if people need more time to think about it, if they want to get more input, cases are continued, and that happens all the time to allow for more input. Likewise, when it does come to City Council from the Plan Commission, you have the option of sending it back to committee if you wanted to. The case that we just finished, the Rail Corp. One other observation. By the time these cases, especially these complex cases like even 200 Vine or the Lincoln and University project, by the time it gets to the Plan Commission and ultimately the City Council, it represents months and months of work within, at the staff level, and multiple changes often by the developer before the plans even see the light of day. And it's in response to staff input and our input, everybody's input, as far as internally. So while you may think a developer is impatient and doesn't want to delay anything, it often represents a huge investment of time and money by the time it gets to the Plan Commission and then ultimately to the Council. Some cases like 200 Vine didn't come from the Plan Commission. That was rezoned 2 years ago, so that project came straight to committee, and everything that was done in the City Council Committee of the Whole, and ultimately the community meetings back to the committee. We had 2-on-2 briefings with council for that one, and then it went back to council. So there were multiple opportunities as well. So each case is different, and simply saying, well, send it to committee first and a week later it'll go to council. Sometimes there's not sometimes it's a fifth Monday, sometimes there's holidays in the way, sometimes travel plans from the petitioner interfere, so you may be looking at more than a week, 2, 3, 4 weeks delay. So it's a lot is tied up in this proposal, and I would urge people to really think about the impact of requiring all this. You do have options for review. In the case of the rail project, it wasn't a threat. They didn't threaten staff. It was just a flat-out statement that that was the last time they would come, or they were walking. So that was the choice.
Mary Alice.
So I think that the big problem here is setting expectations with the builders. Right now, if there is some time in which we have concerns that constituents have contacted us and we don't set the expectation with the
the builders that they'll have to have more conversation with council, I think that that is a disservice to them. So sending it back to committee for conversation definitely drags that process out. I'm concerned because we've been told by staff, and I think this is correct, that as council members, we're not allowed to make any kind of public comment when it is at the zoning or the planning commission, so we can't come and comment at either of those public hearings. We're also not allowed to advocate for changes based on concerns that we have with constituents until it comes before this body. And for that reason, it really hamstrings us. It hamstrings our ability to be able to talk to staff, to talk with our constituents, and move forward with that. I think there were two big projects that came before this body. The first one was the rail project that came, and my biggest concern is that, well, let me step back for a second and say that I think at the end of the day, I think it was a good project. I think that the developers took into consideration some of the items and concerns that the community had. It wasn't perfect, but I think that we made progress. The biggest problem with that plan was that we did not get information that was pertinent to that case until the weekend before we had to vote on it. And that is certainly a disservice to the people, the community members who had architects design things to show us, which were now incorrect when we voted on them. So I support a conversation which would allow us to talk about this in committee. I understand that there are many complex and then many easy zoning and planning commission items, and I think we have to be careful. We don't want things to come to committee that have to do with moving a foot for a garage. So there are going to be small things that could potentially be slowed down by this additional process, but I think we can work it out. I think that we can craft an ordinance that addresses some of the larger projects that might need further thought for the city council, and at the same time not hold back some of the smaller items. So I think I covered all of my major thoughts.
Thanks, Mayor Ellis. Dean, you were up next.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with the mayor, and to put it in my own words, from my experience, we have a reputation of being difficult to work with as far as if you're on the business end of things. I was on that end of things once. It's extremely disheartening and frustrating, and the reason I won't support this is because we frankly nitpick too much. We can't make every battle our mountain to die on. We don't need to voice every single thought we have about a project. I think we should do more of our work behind the scenes and come in prepared, and try and keep it to the nuts and bolts, somewhat of a minimum. If you're an investor and you're traveling and you're dealing with other people's money and schedules, and like I say, you're traveling, you're from out of town, it's extremely frustrating to work with, oftentimes with this council. So if we had a different tone or personality to it, maybe I could support it, but like I said, I've been on that end of things, and it's very frustrating. So that's my concern with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Carol, did you want to jump in?
If I may.
You may.
Thank you. I think, there's some interesting observations that have been made, and I don't want to lose sight of what Lori said at the very beginning, which is the role of the Plan Commission and the ZBA is to convene the public hearing and the public forum, and so in deciding this, how you want to approach this, you have to have in part a discussion of the role of those bodies relative to the role of the council, because if it winds up that the council, in the committee of the whole, having people come and testify amounts to a rehash of what happened at the ZBA or a rehash of what happened at the Plan Commission, then clearly time is being wasted by someone. And so I would just ask you to think about how those two things would go together and not be redundant, because that is not productive for anybody, including members of the community.
Thank you, Carol. Sharice, you're up next.
I think what I wanted to say is I can see both sides of this argument, of this discussion, so to speak, not an argument. In that, and I'm the new kid on the block, so I really feel out of place a lot of times if I don't have enough information and I'm voting on something that I'm not quite sure. And I would like to have more time, and I don't know a lot of times if there's a way that we can get the information earlier, maybe when it just comes out of the plan committee with, some of the bells and whistles that, pictures and whatever, if it needs to be that way. I know that everything doesn't have to have that, that type of time like Mayor Marlin said, but there are some things when, just for one to be more informed, and I definitely don't want the city of Urbana to have a reputation of being hard to work with, because I would like to see this city grow. But at the same time, I'd also would like to be more informed, maybe earlier, if we can do that on a case-by-case basis when it's needed, instead of maybe having a cut and dry requirement, change in the ordinance, or something in writing. If there's just some way that could happen without something having to be put down in black and white and changing all kinds of rules that we already have in place to facilitate that growth. And, I don't know. That's my comment.
Thanks, Sharice. Eric?
So I think there's something wrong with what we have now. If the council is not going to have the ability to deliberate about a project, why involve us at all? Why not let the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Plan Commission make the final decision? And the answer is that we are the body that represents the whole city, ward by ward by ward. And so if we have to make these decisions, we need to have a procedure to deliberate on them properly. We can't be, I would say, the phrase that I would use, I don't want to impugn, I wouldn't impugn, I don't impugn anybody's motives in how the Gather project was pushed through. But boy, did I feel in that meeting way off balance. I really felt as though we were trying to, on the fly, juggle things that we were not prepared to juggle, that we had no way of being prepared to juggle. And I'm actually, although it didn't go the way I voted, I'm not unhappy, really, with the end result. And I do believe that all the issues, at the end of the day, were aired, but it was a lot messier than it should have been, and it might have gone really badly. I don't know if you know how close I was to pulling the plug and saying we ought to, defer it, which would have killed it. But I didn't do it, and I think that's okay. I'm glad that we had the chance, the full council, to make the decision in the manner that they did. But I don't want to go through that again. So I think we should consider, as a posted agenda item, Dennis's proposal or some proposal to give the council a better chance to deliberate and make knowledgeable decisions and considered decisions about these projects.
Dennis? Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Sharice that it would be nice to have some input at the beginning or as soon as possible. I know it's always going to be case-by-case basis because every project's a little different, but with the with the block north, that was pretty much determined once we had the letter of intent. There wasn't going to be much changes except maybe some colors or designs or something. And certainly at the last minute, even a week isn't probably going to make a whole lot of difference as far as what kind of changes they're going to agree to in the last week. I suppose it could, but for the Gather project, it would have been, I mean, that one was kind of frustrating because they did have one public meeting that I couldn't attend because of another city meeting. But even if we had gone to that, we couldn't have discussed anything as a group. That's, I think, what we're missing is being able to discuss something early on, saying, oh, we see your vision and we'll support it in the future. You know, it could be that way too. It could go either way. So if there was some way to bring things like that to us earlier so that we could understand where they're going with it, maybe it would improve the process because they wouldn't have to change it as much if they saw that we would support it from the beginning, and we'd have a chance to talk to our constituents about why it's good. Or it could be, you know, no, that's not going to work. and then we kind of help direct the changes instead of, you know, I mean, these community meetings are great, but I feel like sometimes somebody that lives a couple blocks away from the development and can come to a meeting here in the council chambers and state something publicly has more impact on the development than I do as a council member, because I just get to vote on it at the last minute. And I don't really have any input along the way because we're told we can't talk at those kind of meetings. So yeah, there's some frustration. I think it's just, I don't know if there's anything that city council should or could do to, you know, legislate it, but it does seem like on a case-by-case basis, it would improve things, I think, if we could get more input on it at an early stage. So I guess, I mean, as far as supporting this particular proposal, I do think that most of the decisions that come through the Plan Commission, we can make a decision on with the minutes from the Plan Commission and the discussion, as long as we have time to watch the meeting. Sometimes if their meeting is on Thursday and it comes to us the next Monday, that's a little tight. That doesn't happen very often. But I think in general there's probably enough time. So I don't think I'd support this as far as making it a permanent thing, a required thing. I think in some cases it has happened that you've brought things to committee of the whole, like annexation agreements, I think.
Well, annexation agreements are different because they require a public hearing in front of this body. But as an example, the nursing home, it was very complicated in that it had multiple parts, and as you know, it had a large community discussion. And we felt like it was probably the best idea to bring it to committee of the whole in order to flesh out some of those issues. So there are instances when we see a project and we say, yeah, we should go to committee of the whole on that one, for sure.
And then I guess my final comment would just be that we do have the option of deferring it, and if that's going to kill the project, then it's to staff's benefit to make sure that it's not that tight of a schedule.
Eric, you were next.
I guess one of the questions I have, and then I'll spin remarks off of that. At a public hearing, the council may discuss things that are subjects of public hearing. Is that correct, or not?
No. If you have 3 council members at a public hearing, it's a meeting of a public body under the Open Meetings Act. The reason you shouldn't be testifying or supporting or opposing projects before the Plan Commission or the ZBA is because then you're thrusting yourself in the role of prosecutor, witness, judge, jury. And that leads to a potential denial of due process, which is challengeable by a disgruntled developer who feels they have been stacked against, i.e. litigation.
Somehow, I don't know exactly how to do it procedurally. I mean, Dennis has made one suggestion. Maybe there's a better suggestion. But somehow for council to be able to knowledgeably discuss a project on one occasion before they have to vote on it, if it is a complicated, big project. I really wish we could find that, because otherwise, otherwise I think that we may get outcomes that we really don't like.
Okay, Dennis, and then Diane.
All right, so you wish, I require. I require that we have adequate time to make decisions. Okay, so we're talking about pennies and thousands of dollars. So we might have choose, and I totally appreciate the fact that we're finally talking about this among ourselves. I find it very frustrating. I have learned now to start going to the Planning Commission to find out what the heck is happening before it comes to us, because we're not going to find out until 3 days before we're going to vote on it, many times. Totally inadequate preparation. And Eric, you did talk during one of our one-on-one or two-on-two. You said, if you want us at the end, bring us in on the beginning. And that is so true. So I appreciate, I don't want to get involved in disrupting the negotiations of staff and the developer, because I don't think that that's our place. I'm relying on staff's expertise to assist us. But when it comes to finally making a decision, the Planning Commission is going to decide it by the book, according to certain procedures and square foot and setback requirements and all this. We have a different job. Our position is to represent the community, our constituents, and what is the good of the whole? What is the best that we can get? And if we're giving away a city block of property that's worth $1 million, what can we get for that? Should we be told, no, I'm not going to do any more design for you? And oh, by the way, I bring the design at the last minute so you can see the revision. I wished I had seen that much earlier. And if we can get anything that's been coming from the Planning Commission that's been decided by them sooner, so we can look at it for a week or week and a half, I would appreciate that, yes. So I have a lot of the concerns I think that Mary Alice suggested or mentioned. And yeah, I really do demand that we have more time, appropriate time. And is this off-putting to a developer to know that by our process, this city council actually requires a little more time to consider, and that the process would be to bring a large development first to the committee of the whole and then to the city council? Well, if they knew ahead of time that that was our procedure, I'm sure they would accommodate us, and we could, and they would expect to be able to go through the process that we have here to reach the final agreement, which is accommodates them, perhaps, or perhaps raises questions. But there would be a week then to solve those solutions. I don't know. I don't see it as being a disservice to the developers to require them to have a week to give us a proper time to consider their requests and make a decision and vote, when they've had several months with staff, but we haven't been involved in those discussions in the least. So I'm being a little bit strong on this because I feel the feedback or the pushback from the staff or the mayor's office. I'm just saying that as council members, I experience this differently.
Diane.
I understand where you're coming from. I was a council member for 8 years, so you do get a different perspective when you're on the second floor sometimes. But I think we can find a way to, I think we can find a middle ground. Like I said, I just don't think it's necessary to change, to change the entire process when so much, when you're talking about the few but more complex, larger developments. I mean, that's really what I'm hearing. Is that, and going back to the gather, it's just one of the things I love about this job is fascinating to see how these things all come together, because you don't know that until you're behind the scenes. The developer was frantically working to the very last minute, trying to react to what he was hearing you know, from the neighbors as far as the setback. And that's, I think, one of the changes you saw at the last minute was the extra 65-foot setback, which was a very positive change, and they were working round the clock to do that. They didn't have a lot of time to do it. So, you know, they were under the same pressure that council was in that respect. But it was not because they delayed, it was because they were trying to do everything they could to accommodate what they were hearing from the community. So, but yeah, I think we'll see if we can find a way to
Okay.
do this.
Carol wanted to interject something.
Yeah,
first before we go back.
One thing that I'm hearing is that people want like substantive input earlier in the process. And I think that's a valid desire, and that's something that we can think about how to accommodate. From a developer's perspective, what they don't want to be in the position of is negotiating with staff, then they get to the Plan Commission, and there's the back and forth and wrangling at the Planning Commission, and then there'll be another round of that at the council, because then they just feel whipsawed and there's a lot of churning that goes on. But if we can get your substantive feedback earlier so that that gets incorporated into the conversations as the project is evolving, that works better for everyone, I think. But that requires a different solution than perhaps what you're offering, Dennis.
I'm totally open to the right solution, but I did notice that in our vote, there were abstentions. That would be almost unheard of, you know, in a major decision concerning development in this community.
Eric, you were up next.
Yeah, so maybe one possibility would be, I mean, there might be a dollar trigger. Let's say if we're talking about something that's over $1 million or some round number, maybe the Plan Commission vote or the ZBA vote would trigger a special meeting of the Committee of the Whole to discuss that would come very soon after ZBA or Plan Commission, and this would be a meeting for purpose of discussion.
Information.
Yeah, information and discussion.
I'd like to think of information.
I think the key thing is, so as individuals, we were briefed on this fairly far ahead of time, but there was no chance for us to discuss it as a group until the night we had to make the decision. And there are all sorts of things that come out of the group discussion that don't emerge from the one-on-ones. So I think the key thing is we ought to be able, as soon as possible, there should be no problem if it's after ZBA or Plan Commission. So we ought to be able to discuss it as soon as possible after that, so that and then the developer gets a sense, staff gets a sense, everybody gets a sense, even though it's just for discussion, about where everybody is on it.
The only limitation you have, which you have for this meeting, 48 hours notice.
Right.
Special meeting.
Yeah, so you, as soon as you could do it within the 48-hour, you know, with that 48-hour window, let's have a special Committee of the Whole, and let's not have it, of course, for very routine Plan Commission or ZBA decisions. But, you know, if there's something really big, or even moderately big, then we ought to have a chance to deliberate.
Thanks, Eric. Sharice?
I think I have to agree with Eric here. I think it's more, for me, it's about information. I don't like not having the opportunity to make an informed decision about buying a new curling iron, let alone, you know, getting a $1 million deal or whatever for what's in my community. I did not like having to, I felt forced on some level, even with the Union Gardens in my ward, based on the fact that I knew it was basically a done deal. There wasn't a whole lot I could say. There wasn't my no vote or any vote wasn't going to make a whole lot of difference. And I don't like feeling like that. And I felt underinformed. I agree with you on that. I did not feel that I represented my ward very well by abstaining, because I, at the same time, felt I don't know enough about it, and I wasn't informed enough to make a clear opinion, let alone, you know, opposition to anything. And it's just a matter of being myself. I like to be more informed, and if there's a way that one can, it can be arranged that, like you said, if we can come together and discuss something, so that there's not that feeling of powerlessness when you're talking about the people that you represent. You know, I'm representing folks that they didn't want that in their neighborhood, but I also knew it's a done deal. And that didn't make me feel real good. So I just want to be more informed, and I'd like to have the information. And then that way, if there's something that's not right, something that's not agreeable, everyone has the opportunity to go back to not necessarily the drawing board, but at least to go back and revisit other issues for big development. Like I said, for the small things, yeah, but for big decisions like that, I think it's worth us at least putting forth the effort to get more information in some kind of way.
Thanks, Sharice. I had one comment before we take other folks. Lori, I know one thing that I would like to see is, I know we get emails about when things are coming before Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals, but I feel like those are often, maybe not all of them, of course, but when they warrant from your guys' expertise our attention, or you know there's something that's going to end up on our plate that we're going to have discussion about, at the very least, in staff reports, we could make announcements about what's coming before it, and maybe just a brief 2-minute thing about what it's about, just to make people aware.
Just for clarification, do you mean during the staff report on the agenda items for this body?
Yes. I know they don't always work out that way, but when we have that opportunity, if there is an upcoming, anytime there's an upcoming one that follows a meeting, if we haven't already heard an announcement about it, we should hear about it if it's significant, so that we all have the opportunity to know that maybe we want to attend, maybe we want to inform our constituents that they should attend, because it's happening. I know we get them, but I don't know if that announcement is publicly out there enough to get everybody involved. I feel like it's still a little down, and if we even just did that one little step to add those announcements when they're significant to warrant to the whole committee, the whole meetings, and council meetings when they're relevant, I think that would go a long way. All right, that was my one thought. Bill, you're up next.
Yeah, I did want to thank the staff for, I know you had several projects all kind of going at the same time, and I think you did a great job on it. And I know it's a lot of work with engineering and subdivisions and all the different
I appreciate that too.
waivers and rezonings and everything. I think we appreciate that, and I don't want to see surprises at the end. I don't think anybody wants to see surprises or changes at the last minute. So whatever we do, I think we should keep in mind that what we want to avoid is last minute changes that could change something we hadn't thought about before. You know, maybe that 65-foot setback is actually going to mess something up down the road, and they didn't put enough thought into it ahead of time. I don't know. I hope it doesn't, but you know, that's an example. It would be better to, you know, if we could iron those things out at the beginning or, you know, earlier. I don't know. I know it's really hard, but it is. I understand the frustration, and I think we should do everything we can to avoid last-minute changes and last-minute surprises, things like that.
So I think, just to round this up, I think there is a consensus that we'd like to at least see something, Carol, from you guys, Lori, Diane, about how we can have more substantive and informed conversation prior to it, whether or not that ends us creating a new ordinance or not. I think that that is pretty clear amongst everyone that we feel we would want to make an as informed decision as possible. And Eric, I think everybody got that we should do it together and not just in the briefings that we've gotten on some of the projects before. So we'll, I think unless anybody wants to make any other suggestions, I think that we'll leave it to you guys to bring something back to us and make a suggestion as to how we can do that. Diane, you have
Question. One thing we have tried to do is more of the briefings to give you guys more context, more information, heads up. Do you still, are those useful to you, or would you rather
Yes.
not do them?
Are useful to me.
Yes, briefings are very useful.
Sure.
They're not the whole thing that we need, but they're very,
Okay,
very useful.
all right.
Dennis, one last comment?
Yeah, I would really just like to thank everyone for having a really, I think, useful conversation. And I think that, that we're going to see some kind of change which will satisfy me and you, because, you know, all right, I'm taking kind of a certain point just to motivate a conversation of change. But if we don't have these conversations of change, we will feel in a corner more than once in the future. And why don't we just stop that and heal the situation and become smarter? And that's what I'm asking.
Okay, Eric?
The only other point I'd make is that, of course, these problems that we're having are because the mayor and the staff are doing a good job of finding opportunities. And these opportunities are also challenges. So we're pushing back a little bit and saying we're trying to make your life a little more complicated, but I think we'll be all the better for it.
It's because we haven't had much practice.
We will.
All right, any last thoughts? All right, we'll adjourn this meeting. See y'all next week.
Okie dokie.